You're filthy. Not the modern kind of filthy. Not I skipped a shower filthy. Real filthy. Dirt packed under your nails. Smoke baked into your hair. Animal grease smeared across your arms. Dried sweat, old blood, plant sap. And whatever you stepped in 2 days ago still clinging to your skin. And there is no soap. None. Not in your camp. Not in the next camp. Not anywhere on earth for tens of thousands of years. So how are you not dead? How did your ancestors live entire lifetimes covered in the kind of grime that would send a modern person into a spiral of anxiety, and still manage to raise children, hunt, gather, tell stories, and keep the human line going? For 99% of human history, this was simply what a body looked like. Let's start with the most honest question we can ask. How dirty were they, really? The answer is more complicated than extremely. They were dirtier than us in the ways we notice most: visible dirt, smell, oil, smoke. But they were cleaner than us in ways we rarely think about. They didn't live in sealed rooms full of recycled air. They didn't wear synthetic fabrics that trap moisture and bacteria against the skin for hours. They didn't eat a constant stream of sugar that feeds certain microbes in the mouth and gut. They didn't sit still for most of the day. Their dirt was mostly living dirt, soil, ash, plant resins, animal fat, wood smoke, river water. It was the dirt of the world itself. And the human body evolved inside that world. Water was the first and most important cleaning tool. Whenever people were near rivers, lakes, streams, or even heavy rain, they used it. Not in the modern full-body hot shower sense. But they rinsed. They soaked. They rubbed wet hands over skin and hair. In warmer climates this happened more often. In colder climates it happened less. Still, regular contact with water removed a huge amount of the worst accumulation. Children played in water when they could. Adults washed blood and fat off their hands after butchering. Women washed after childbirth when water was available. It wasn't ritualized cleanliness. It was practical removal of the things that felt bad or smelled strong. But water alone doesn't cut grease very well. That's where the second tool came in. Ash. Wood ash mixed with a little water becomes mildly alkaline. It breaks down oils and fats. Many groups used it the way we use soap. They rubbed ash on greasy hands, on cooking stones, on hides, sometimes on their own skin, then rinsed. It wasn't gentle. It could dry the skin, but it worked. In some places people mixed ash with animal fat to make a rough early paste that behaved a bit like soap. They didn't need to understand chemistry. They only needed to notice that the combination made grease come off more easily. Animal fat itself was used in 2 directions at once: protection and cleaning. Rubbed on the skin, fat created a barrier against wind, cold, and biting insects. It kept moisture from leaving the body too fast. When the fat got dirty, it could be scraped off. And a lot of the dirt came with it. Fresh fat went on. Old fat came off. A simple cycle. Certain plants help too. There are plants that, when crushed or rubbed in water, create a soapy lather. We still call them soap plants. Soaproot, soapberry, and many others. People who lived near them used them. Other plants have mild antimicrobial effects. Over generations, groups learned which leaves, roots, and barks made skin feel cleaner or helped small wounds stay cleaner. They didn't have laboratories. They had observation, memory, and consequences. Smoke was another constant, quiet cleaner. Campfires burned most days and most nights. People sat in smoke. They slept near smoke. They preserved meat with smoke. Smoke dries the skin, reduces certain bacteria, and drives away insects. Spending hours every day in the presence of wood smoke had a side effect modern people forget: a low level, ongoing disinfection of skin and clothing. And then there was the sun. Ultraviolet light kills microbes. Skin and any clothing people wore spent long hours under open sky. Sunlight was a free, daily sterilizing force. It didn't make anyone spotless, but it lowered the load of living things trying to grow on the body. All of these methods mattered, but none of them was the real reason humans survived without soap. The deeper reasons were structural. Hunter-gatherers moved. They did not live on top of their own waste for months or years. A camp was used, the area around it became dirtier. Parasites and flies increased, and the group moved on. The landscape itself helped reset the hygiene situation. This is one of the biggest differences between mobile foragers and later settled farmers or city dwellers. Once people stayed in one place, waste accumulated, water sources got contaminated, and disease pressure rose sharply. Soap became much more important after that shift. Before it, movement did a lot of the work that soap later had to do. Diet played a role too. Forager diets were generally lower in refined carbohydrates and sugars than modern diets. That meant less fuel for the kinds of bacteria that thrive in sugary, starchy environments, especially in the mouth. Tooth decay was much less common in many pre-agricultural groups. Skin and gut microbial communities were shaped by a different kind of food. There was also the immune system itself. Children in these societies were exposed early and often to a wide range of microbes, parasites, and dirt. Their immune systems developed in conversation with the real world instead of in highly sanitized spaces. What looks like dangerous filth to a modern parent was, for them, ordinary training data. This doesn't mean they were immune to everything. It means their baseline tolerance was different. None of this should be romanticized. Infection still killed people. A deep cut could become fatal. Childbirth was dangerous. Parasites were common. Gastrointestinal illness existed. Skin infections existed. People died from things that soap, antibiotics, and clean water later made rare. The archaeological and anthropological record is clear on this. Life was harder on the body in many ways. Average lifespans were shorter, largely because of high child mortality and the lack of medical intervention. But the combination of occasional washing, ash, smoke, sunlight, mobility, diet, and a microbially experienced immune system was enough. Enough for people to live, reproduce, and pass on knowledge for hundreds of thousands of years. Let's look closer at specific situations. After a kill, hands and arms were covered in blood and fat. People rinsed in water when available, rubbed with ash or sand, scraped with tools, and wiped on grass or hides. They didn't achieve surgical cleanliness. They achieved clean enough to keep working. After childbirth, the same practical logic applied. Water, soft plant materials, ash in some places, smoke, rest, and the help of other women. Infection was a real risk. Many women and infants died from it. But many others survived using only what the land and the group provided. Wounds were cleaned with water, covered with leaves, mud, or animal membrane in some traditions, and left to the body's own repair systems more often than we would dare. Some groups used specific plant poultices that modern chemistry has later shown to have mild antimicrobial effects. Again, not because they had microscopes, but because trial, error, and memory accumulated over generations. Clothing, when it existed, was cleaned by beating, rinsing, smoking, and sunning. Hides were scraped and worked until they were relatively clean and flexible. People didn't have closets full of clothes. They had what they wore and maybe one other set. Dirt was part of the material. Hair was a different problem. In many groups it was cut short, covered, or treated with fats and oils that could later be removed. Lice existed. People dealt with them by grooming each other, a social activity as much as a hygienic one. Close physical grooming is ancient. It still exists in every human culture in some form. The smell of a prehistoric camp would probably shock a modern person. Smoke, sweat, dried meat, hides, human bodies, and the surrounding land all mixed together. But smell is relative. When everyone smells similar, the social meaning of odor changes. Strong human smell was normal. It wasn't automatically a source of shame or social rejection the way it can be today. Here's the deeper shift that happened later. When people settled into permanent villages and then cities, everything changed. Waste stayed in one place. Water sources became easier to contaminate. Population density increased. Disease transmission became more efficient. The old methods that worked for mobile groups became less sufficient. That's when stronger cleaning technologies became much more valuable. Soap, once it appeared and spread, made a real difference, especially in crowded conditions. Clean water systems made an even bigger difference. Antibiotics later changed the game completely, but it's important to remember the order of events. Humans did not invent soap and then become able to live. Humans lived for an enormous span of time, and then invented soap as conditions changed. You live in a world where cleanliness is both a health practice and a moral feeling. Being clean feels responsible. Being dirty feels like failure. We have products for every part of the body, every type of dirt, every desired scent. We can become almost odorless and almost microbe-free on the surface if we try hard enough. Your ancestors lived in a world where the body was allowed to be a living thing among other living things. Dirt was not an emergency. It was a condition to be managed with the tools at hand: water, ash, smoke, sun, movement, and time. They scraped what they could. They rinsed when water was near. They sat in smoke. They let the sun do part of the work. They moved camp before the filth became overwhelming. They accepted a baseline of grime that would feel unbearable to most people alive today. And generation after generation, it was enough. They didn't survive because they had better hygiene than us. They survived because their expectations of the body were older and tougher. And because the world they lived in still did a lot of the cleaning work that we have since had to take over ourselves. You wake up clean most mornings because a vast system of water pipes, chemistry, and culture makes it possible. They woke up as clean as the previous day. The river, the ash, and the smoke had left them. And somehow, across hundreds of thousands of years, that was sufficient to keep the human story going. Not spotless, not sanitized, just clean enough.